we were a couple.
Right.
And then yes.
When you were dating previous to her, did women give you a hard time about being a freelance writer and poverty and that stuff?
Absolutely not. No, because the women that I knew were all fairly artistic, and they were trying to be dancers or writers, and they understood it. They didn't expect a lot from me. You know, I never went to fancy restaurants in San Francisco. I lived in a hovel in Palo Alto. And no, so there was nothing, there was nothing like that. And as I became a writer, I had such confidence that it was the correct thing for me that I'm sure I would have conveyed that if you didn't think this was cool, probably you shouldn't be around me because I wouldn't give an inch.
What role has Judaism played in your life?
I knew you were going to ask that. And so I want to give a really good answer and a sincere answer. So maybe I'll backtrack and give a little history.
Yes.
Okay. The part of Brooklyn I grew up in was called Flatbush. That's a big neighborhood, and it's a famous neighborhood. And
yeah.
The section of Flatbush I grew up in is Midwood. That's how they got the name for the high school. When I was growing up, Midwood was a middle-class Jewish neighborhood, meaning on the high holy days, maybe at PS 193, my elementary school, 2 kids, 3 kids. Sometimes at the end, they eventually just shut them. So I grew up with a tremendous Jewish identity, and my parents had lived through, obviously, the Holocaust. They were both first-generation Americans, so they saw themselves as an insular group different from non-Jews. So I had all of that. We were in a synagogue. It was an Orthodox synagogue, and I had a bar mitzvah. My brother had a bar mitzvah. My sister did not have a bat mitzvah. I don't know why. So I was clearly Jewish, and Dawn and I have a son, Grant Iggy, and my wife is not Jewish, but he's been brought up Jewish and had a bar mitzvah. So the identity of being Jewish is absolutely essential to me. Yet I work on Rosh Hashanah. I work on Yom Kippur. We do light the candles on a Friday night. Sometimes we light the candles on Hanukkah. But we also put up a Christmas tree. It makes Dawn happy, and it doesn't bother me to do that. So I have a very I guess what I'm saying is I have a very strong sense of identity of being a Jew, but I don't really practice it very much at all. I don't ever think about eating kosher, nothing like that.
Have you ever experienced anti-Semitism?
When I was in college, it was all these guys, and we were outside of Philadelphia, and I don't know how familiar you are with that area, there's an area called the Main Line. It was a railroad line that went through, a commuter line, and it's very wealthy, and I guess you'd say WASP. A lot of those guys went to Lafayette College, and I'm reasonably sure a certain percentage of them saw me as just, a Jew. For the most part, the living arrangements were fraternities, and as I recall, I may have the number wrong, but I'm pretty close. There were 20-something fraternities, but Jews would only be accepted in about 3 or 4. So I certainly experienced that. No one ever said anything to my face, but that's how things worked. But my attitude at the time was, I don't give a shit. It seemed just like how things were. I'm not particularly friendly with many people from that college anymore, but so I guess that was a kind of de facto or whatever kind of anti-Semitism. Never in my whole life, as far as I can recall, have I ever experienced anything like that. Never.
Wow.
I'm not aware of it. Maybe if I thought and dredged my memory, but no. I mean, I lived in New York. Then now I live in the Bay Area, and those are the areas are so cosmopolitan, and they're so full of Jews that no, I never felt that. Now, Dawn tells me that when she was growing up, her family would say things. And there was one time, my mother-in-law, it was very funny, and I'll tell you this story, and my mother-in-law's gone. Her name was Anne. She was Italian descent. Lovely lady, unsophisticated. So one day, we're having dinner. I was married to Dawn. We're having dinner at her mom's place. She lived in San Leandro, maybe 15 minutes south of here. And Dawn said she was going shopping the next day, and Anne, my mother-in-law, said, well, when you're there, you want to get a good price, so Jew them down. So she said this. And I'm sitting at the table, and I'm thinking, geez, this is my mother-in-law. So afterward, I said, Anne, we have to dinner. I said, could we go in the living room a minute? I have a question to ask you. She said, sure, dear. So we went in the living room. I said, look, you know how at dinner you said to Dawn she should Jew them down? She said, yeah, I said it. I said, well, that's sort of like you're not supposed to say stuff like that. That's a put down of Jews. She said, oh, no, it's just an expression. And, okay, I didn't think she was sophisticated enough that I could get into it's just an expression. So right. I said, Anne, you know that I'm Jewish. She says, oh, yeah, of course I do. And I said, well, we sometimes find that a little offensive. She said, no, not at all. So I said, I'll tell you what. I want to make my point. What if I were to say to you, Anne, you're nothing but a dago? She said, I am nothing but a dago. So I said, I love you. I gave her a kiss, and that was the end of it.
Are there Jewish ways that you think, and if so, what are they?
Okay. One Jewish way that I think is everybody I meet, I wonder, I decide, is that person Jewish or not? That would be one of the first things. And it was inculcated in me, my mom and dad. So, like, I teach every spring. I teach creative writing at University of San Francisco. In a few weeks, I'm going to get my class list. I'll go through the class list right away and look for Jewish names. So it's a us and them mentality, which I am a stereotype for that. My humor is probably what you'd identify as New York Jewish, which is ironic, too sarcastic, also self-deprecating in a lot of ways, looking for the absurdity in things all the time. I think if you read certain Jewish writers, that's a pattern that's there all the time. So I would say that my mindset is argumentative, arguing a point, making fine distinctions, that kind of thing, causing trouble, verbal trouble, all of that, I think, at least in my mind, are Jewish ways to proceed.
Yeah, I saw it particularly in, I think it was a blog post you made about God and the 49ers' third Super Bowl victory, the one where Bill Walsh retired. And were you talking also about Mike Singletary saying that God was on our side, or someone saying God is on our side? And you approvingly quoted Bill Walsh, saying that God has more important things than rooting for a particular sports team.
Yeah, I had written a book on Bill, and I found that quote and put it in. Yes, I had remembered that, and I was pleased that Bill felt that way. And the idea that in his sort of inaugural speech, here is Singletary saying that God's going to lead him where he needs to go. Clearly, he had not thought through the implications of it. His opponent's coach could say the same thing. And where's God going to be then? Rooting for the Eagles or whoever, and the Niners. So yeah, I definitely did feel that. Now, do I spend much time thinking about God? No, I don't. I just don't much think about God. It doesn't. The concept does not have a lot of resonance in my life. But I am very respectful and sometimes envious of people who have deep faith. I'm so secular in the way I lead my life, but I'm aware of some of my friends who have deep faith, and I respect it and admire them.
Why are you a sports writer?
I'm a sports writer because when I applied to the San Francisco Chronicle, and that would have been, when I applied, would have been early 79, I applied either as a film critic or a sports writer, and they had a film critic, and they asked me what I want to be